What if I told you that a 9-year-old girl with homemade cookies saved a billionaire's life, only for him to destroy hers? This is the story of Philip Godswood, a man who had everything money could buy, but lost the only thing that truly mattered. If you love stories about redemption and second chances, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about success. Picture this. Late October. 55 stories above the city, inside a glass tower that touches the clouds, Philip Godswood stands at the center of his empire. His penthouse office is a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame the skyline like a painting. Architectural models of billion-dollar properties cover every surface. His desk, made from rare Italian marble, holds contracts that could change entire neighborhoods with a single signature. This is a man who doesn't just own real estate. He owns horizons. He owns dreams. He owns the very ground people walk on. But here's what you need to understand about Philip Godswood. Every handshake is calculated. Every smile is a negotiation. Every relationship is a transaction. His $3,000 suit fits perfectly. His silver hair is groomed to precision. His watch costs more than most people's homes. He looks like success. He smells like power. He moves through the world like a man who has conquered it. And in many ways, he has. But on his credenza, behind the Crystal Awards and industry recognition plaques, sit 3 framed photographs. Jack, his oldest son. Dre, the middle child. And Lola. Sweet Lola. 9 years old. Forever 9 years old. Because there's a black ribbon across the corner of her frame. And that ribbon tells a story that no amount of money can rewrite. 6 months ago, Philip Godswood's world didn't just crack. It shattered. Completely. Irreversibly. It was a Tuesday. A regular Tuesday. Except it wasn't regular at all. Lola had a school event. A simple presentation. She'd practiced for weeks. She'd begged her father to come. Begged him. But Philip had a meeting. An important meeting. A deal worth $40 million. A deal that couldn't wait. A deal that seemed, in that moment, more important than watching his daughter talk about her science project. So he said no. He said next time. He said Daddy has to work. And Lola said okay. Because that's what Lola always said. Okay, Daddy. Next time, Daddy. I understand, Daddy. Except there would be no next time. Because on that Tuesday afternoon, while Philip Godswood signed contracts in a boardroom 200 miles away, while he shook hands and talked profit margins and celebrated his newest acquisition, his daughter was gone. A terrible accident. A moment of chaos. A split second that changed everything. By the time Philip's assistant interrupted the meeting, by the time he chartered a private jet, by the time he rushed to the hospital, it was already over. Lola was gone. And the last words she'd said to him were, "It's okay, Daddy. I understand." But she shouldn't have had to understand. She was 9 years old. She should have had her father there. And now she never would again. What happens when a man who controls everything loses control of the only thing that matters? Maureen, Philip's wife, looked at him across their daughter's hospital bed and said 5 words that destroyed what was left of their marriage. You weren't there for her. Not an accusation. Just a fact. A simple, devastating fact. And Philip had no defense. Because she was right. He wasn't there. He was never there. Not for Lola's first recital. Not for her birthday parties. Not for the quiet moments that make up a childhood. He was always somewhere else. Always closing another deal. Always building another tower. Always chasing the next success. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. Jack and Dre, his sons, stopped returning his calls. They blamed him. How could they not? Their sister was dead, and their father had chosen a meeting over her. In the months that followed, Philip threw himself into work with an intensity that frightened even his most ambitious colleagues. He closed deals at 3 in the morning. He acquired properties like a man possessed. He built and built and built. Towers reaching toward the sky. Empty monuments to a man who had hollowed himself out. Because here's the thing about grief that nobody tells you. It doesn't just hurt. It consumes. It becomes a living thing inside you. and Philip Gods would let it consume him completely. He stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping, stopped living. He was going through the motions of existence, but the man behind the expensive suits was already gone. Already dead inside. Just waiting for his body to catch up. November 1st. Philip's 55th birthday. His company throws a celebration in his office. Champagne that costs $500 a bottle. Catered food from the city's most exclusive restaurant. Colleagues and business partners filling the space with hollow laughter and empty congratulations. But no family. No Maureen. No Jack. No Dre. And no Lola. Never again, Lola. Philip stands by the window, glass of champagne in hand, looking out at the city he's helped build. And suddenly, the room starts spinning. His chest tightens like a vice. His left arm goes numb. The champagne glass slips from his fingers and shatters on the marble floor. Someone screams. Someone calls 911. And Philip Godswood, the man who built an empire, collapses. Just collapses. Right there on his office floor, surrounded by people who work for him but don't really know him. People who respect his money but have never seen his pain. The ambulance arrives within minutes. Sirens wailing. Paramedics rushing. All that urgency. All that effort to save a man who has already given up on saving himself. Because as they load him onto the stretcher, as they hook him up to machines and rush him through city streets, Philip Godswood makes a decision. A quiet, terrible decision. He's done fighting. Done pretending. Done living in a world without his daughter. If this is how it ends, then let it end. 3 days pass. Philip lies in a private hospital room, staring at the ceiling. The doctors have stabilized him. Physically, at least. A severe cardiac event, they called it. Brought on by chronic stress, poor self-care, and what one doctor carefully termed a failure to process significant emotional trauma. Translation: grief was literally killing him. And Philip didn't care. He refused physical therapy. Barely touched his food. Turned away visitors from his company. What was the point? What was any of it for? All that money. All that success. All those buildings with his name on them. And he couldn't save one 9-year-old girl. Couldn't turn back time. Couldn't choose differently. The nurses whispered about him. The sad billionaire in room 412. The man who had everything except the will to live. His doctors grew increasingly concerned. They spoke in hushed tones about depression, about psychiatric evaluation, about the fact that you can lead a patient to treatment but you cannot make them want to survive. And then, on his 4th night in the hospital, something changed. Something small. Something that would alter the entire trajectory of Philip Godswood's life. He heard laughter. Children's laughter. Clear and bright and impossibly alive. Coming from somewhere down the hallway. Her name was Maya. 9 years old. Pigtails tied with yellow ribbons. A gap between her front teeth that made her smile look like sunshine. She appeared in Philip's doorway holding a plastic container of homemade cookies, chocolate chip, slightly burnt around the edges. "My mama says sad people need cookies," she announced, walking right into his room without invitation or fear. Philip stared at her. This child. This impossibly alive child who looked so much like... No. He couldn't think it. Couldn't make that comparison. But Maya didn't notice his silence. She climbed up into the chair beside his bed, swinging her legs because they didn't quite reach the floor, and started talking. About her day. About her school. About how her teacher, Miss Chen, gave her a gold star for her math homework. About how she was learning to draw horses, but they kept looking like dogs with long faces. She talked and talked and talked. And Philip, for the first time in 6 months, listened. Really listened. Not because he wanted to, but because she reminded him of everything he'd lost. Everything he'd failed to protect. When she finally paused for breath, Philip managed to ask, "Why are you here?" Maya shrugged. "My mama works here. She cleans the floors at night. Sometimes I come with her when there's no school the next day. It gets boring, so I visit people." She said it so simply. As if visiting dying strangers was the most natural thing in the world. As if her small presence could possibly matter to anyone. Except it did matter. It mattered more than Philip could possibly explain. Because for just a moment, listening to this child's innocent chatter, he forgot to want to die. That's when Rose appeared in the doorway. Maya's mother. 32 years old, but with eyes that had seen too much hardness. She wore the hospital's cleaning service uniform, and there was exhaustion in the set of her shoulders. "Maya, baby, you can't just wander into patients' rooms," Rose said gently but firmly. Then she looked at Philip with an expression that was part apology, part defiance. "I'm sorry, sir. She doesn't mean any harm. She just—" "It's fine," Philip heard himself say. And then, surprising even himself, "She can visit. If she wants to." Rose's eyes narrowed slightly. Suspicious. Because she'd worked enough jobs serving wealthy people to know that kindness from them often came with strings attached. But Maya was already bouncing in her chair, delighted. "Really? Can I come back tomorrow?" And Philip, the man who had spent 6 months wishing he was dead, found himself nodding. "Yes. Tomorrow." After they left, Philip lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time since Lola's death, he felt something other than crushing despair. Not happiness. Not even hope. Just a flicker. A tiny spark of something that might, possibly, eventually become a reason to keep breathing. Maya came back the next night. And the night after that. And the night after that. She brought drawings. Terrible, wonderful drawings of cats and houses and rainbows. She brought more cookies, each batch slightly less burnt than the last. She brought stories. Endless stories. About her friend Emma who ate a worm on a dare. About the librarian at school who let her check out extra books. About her dreams of becoming a veterinarian or maybe an astronaut or maybe both, because why should she have to choose? And slowly, impossibly, Philip began to heal. Not his body. The doctors were handling that. But something deeper. Something that had broken when Lola died. He started asking Maya questions. About her life. Her interests. Her favorite subjects in school. He found himself looking forward to her visits. Watching the clock. Wondering what story she'd bring tonight. Rose maintained careful distance. Professional. Polite. But Philip noticed things. How worn her shoes were. How she always declined when he offered to order her food from the hospital cafeteria. How sometimes her eyes would fill with sadness when she watched Maya chatter away, as if she was remembering something. Or someone. One night, Maya mentioned her father. "Timothy. He died last year," she said matter-of-factly, the way children do when they've learned to speak of tragedy as simple fact. "He was sick for a long time. But Mama says he's watching over us now from heaven." And Philip understood then. The sadness in Rose's eyes. The reason she worked nights, probably cobbling together multiple jobs. The reason Maya wandered hospital hallways instead of being home in bed. They were survivors. Just like him. Except they were surviving together. While he had chosen to survive alone. For the first time since his collapse, Philip engaged with his treatment. He ate the food they brought him. All of it. He participated in physical therapy. He asked questions about his medication. His doctors were stunned. Thrilled. Whatever had changed, they wanted to encourage it. Philip knew what had changed. A 9-year-old girl with burnt cookies and sunshine smile had reminded him that life could still matter. That presence could still mean something. That he could still show up for someone, even if he'd failed to show up for his own daughter. He started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't deserve to die. Maybe he deserved a chance to do better. To be better. To honor Lola's memory by being the kind of man she'd needed him to be. And then, just as Philip was beginning to glimpse a path forward, just as he was starting to imagine a future where he could make amends and find purpose again, everything fell apart. It was December 3rd. Maya didn't come. Philip waited. Watched the door. Told himself she was just sick. Or busy. Normal things. But she didn't come the next night either. Or the next. By the 4th night, Philip was frantic. He cornered one of the nurses. The cleaning woman, Rose. And her daughter Maya. "Where are they?" The nurse looked uncomfortable. "I heard Rose was let go, sir. I don't know the details." "Let go?" Fired. Gone. Philip's hands shook as he reached for his phone. He called his personal assistant. Find out what happened. Find out where they are. And find out now. The story came back within hours. Rose had been accused of theft. A supervisor claimed that medications had gone missing from supply closets on her shift. There was no proof. No evidence. Just accusation from a colleague who'd been jealous of Rose's work ethic, who'd seen an opportunity to eliminate competition for a supervisor position. The hospital administration had taken the easy route. Fire the cleaning woman. Cover their bases. Move on. Rose's spotless record meant nothing. Her protests meant nothing. She was escorted out that very day. And Maya. Sweet Maya with her burnt cookies and endless stories. She was gone too. Philip lay in his hospital bed, and for the first time in weeks, the crushing despair returned. But this time, it came with something else. Something he hadn't felt in months. Rage. Pure, focused rage. Not at the universe. Not at fate. But at injustice. At cruelty. At a system that would destroy a good woman's livelihood based on lies. He had failed Lola. He couldn't change that. But Maya and Rose. They were alive. They were still here. And this time, Philip Godswood would not be absent. This time, he would show up. Something crystallized in Philip's chest as he stared at the ceiling that night. A clarity he hadn't felt since before Lola's death. Maybe since before Lola was even born. He couldn't bring his daughter back. He couldn't rewind time and choose her presentation over his meeting. He couldn't undo the worst decision of his life. But he could choose differently now. He could be present now. He could show up now. And that's exactly what he was going to do. The next morning, Philip called his doctor. Whatever I need to do to get out of here, I'll do it. Physical therapy. Medication. Counseling. All of it. But I need to leave. The doctor was hesitant. Philip wasn't fully recovered. But he saw something in his patient's eyes that hadn't been there before. Determination. Purpose. A reason to live. We'll start discharge planning, the doctor said. As Philip began his accelerated recovery, pushing his body harder than the therapists recommended, forcing himself to heal faster than was probably wise, he had his assistant begin an investigation. Find Rose. Find Maya. Learn everything. Where they were living. What Rose was doing for work. What they needed. What they were facing. Because Philip Godswood had spent 6 months learning how to die. Now it was time to learn how to live. But here's what he didn't know. Here's what he couldn't have known. By the time he found them, by the time he was ready to make things right, it would almost be too late. Can a billionaire who failed his own daughter find redemption by saving someone else's? Or are some failures simply too great to overcome? Philip Godswood discharged himself from the hospital 3 weeks early. Against doctors' orders. Against common sense. Against every medical professional who told him he was risking his life. But here's what they didn't understand. He'd already risked everything that mattered. Already lost everything worth having. What was a little physical danger compared to moral failure? His personal assistant, Janitor, met him in the hospital lobby with a thick manila folder. Her face was grave. Mr. Godswood, are you sure you want to see this? Philip grabbed the folder without answering. Inside were photographs, documents, information that made his blood run cold. Rose and Maya weren't just struggling. They were drowning. After being fired from the hospital, Rose had found work at an underfunded orphanage on the edge of the city. The pay was a fraction of what she'd earned before. Barely enough to cover rent. Certainly not enough for food and utilities and everything else a single mother needs to keep her daughter safe. The apartment they lived in was documented in the photos. Peeling paint. Cracked windows. A neighborhood where police sirens were the soundtrack of daily life. But worse than any of that, worse than the poverty and struggle, was the date circled in red on Rose's calendar. December 27th. 1 year since Timothy's death. 1 year since Maya lost her father. And they would spend that anniversary barely surviving. Barely holding on. Because of lies. Because of jealousy. because Philip hadn't been strong enough to protect them when it mattered. The rage that had sparked in his hospital bed now became an inferno. Most billionaires would have sent a check, made a phone call, had their people handle it, fixed the problem from a comfortable distance. But Philip had learned something during those weeks with Maya. Presence matters. Showing up matters. Being there, physically there, is what transforms charity into connection, money into meaning. So he made a decision that terrified him. He would go himself. No intermediaries. No representatives. No buffer between him and the consequences of his inaction. Jennifer tried to talk him out of it. "Sir, you just left the hospital. You're not well. At least let me arrange a proper meeting. Send advance notice. Do this professionally." But Philip shook his head. "I've spent my whole life doing things professionally, Jennifer. Being strategic. Maintaining distance. And you know what it got me? A dead daughter and a destroyed family. No more distance. No more strategy. This time, I show up." He had Jennifer make arrangements. Not for a meeting, but for solutions. Real, tangible solutions. A house. Not an apartment. A real house in a safe neighborhood with good schools. A job for Rose. Not charity disguised as employment, but a genuine position with dignity and fair compensation. Legal consultations about adoption. Because Philip had realized something during his recovery. Maya needed more than money. She needed stability. Security. A future where one bad accusation couldn't destroy everything. But first, he had to face them. Had to look Rose in the eye and admit he'd failed to protect them. Had to prove he was different from every other wealthy person who'd made promises then disappeared. The address led Philip to a part of the city he owned buildings in but had never actually visited. Isn't that the cruel irony of wealth? You can own entire neighborhoods without ever walking their streets. The apartment building was worse in person than in photographs. Graffiti tagged the walls. The front door hung crooked on broken hinges. Somewhere above, a baby cried. Philip climbed 3 flights of stairs, each step harder than the last. Not because of his recent hospital stay, but because of what he was about to face. He knocked on apartment 307. Soft at first, then louder. The door opened. Rose stood there, and the shock on her face was immediate. "Mr. Godswood, how did you? What are you?" Then she saw his expression. Saw something in his eyes that made her step back. Not in fear, but in recognition. The look of someone who understands grief when they see it. "May I come in?" Philip asked. His voice was rough, uncertain, nothing like the commanding tone he used in boardrooms. Rose hesitated, then nodded, stepped aside. Let him enter their world. And what Philip saw inside that apartment broke something fundamental inside him. They'd created a memorial. Candles everywhere. Photographs of Timothy covering one entire wall. A small cake on the kitchen table with a single candle. Maya sat on a worn couch, holding a framed picture of her father, tears streaming down her young face. This was how they honored the dead. This was how they remembered. In poverty. In struggle. In a space that was barely livable. While Philip had honored Lola with a foundation that wrote checks but never touched lives. With buildings that bore her name but contained none of her spirit. Maya looked up. Saw Philip. And despite her tears, despite the weight of this terrible anniversary, her face lit up. "Mr. Philip." She jumped from the couch and ran to him. Then stopped. Suddenly shy. Unsure if hugging was allowed. Philip knelt down. Ignored the pain in his knees. Ignored everything except this child who'd saved his life. "Hi, Maya. I've missed you." Rose watched them carefully. "Maya, baby, go to your room for a minute. Mr. Godswood and I need to talk." But Philip shook his head. "No, please. I came to see both of you. I came because I owe you an apology." Rose's expression hardened. "An apology? You were a patient, Mr. Godswood. What happened to us wasn't your fault." "But I could have stopped it," Philip said. "I knew something was wrong when you stopped coming. I had the resources, the connections, the power to investigate and intervene. And I did nothing until it was too late. The words hung in the air. Honest. Raw. Unpolished. Rose's eyes narrowed. So you're here now because you feel guilty? Because you want to feel better about yourself? It was a fair question. A brutal question. And Philip had to answer it. Had to be honest in a way billionaires rarely are. I'm here because my daughter died 6 months ago, he said quietly. Because I wasn't there when she needed me. Because I chose work over presence. Success over showing up. And I can't change that. I can't bring Lola back. But Maya reminded me that life still matters. That being present still matters. And I failed you both. I won't fail you again. The silence that followed was deafening. Philip sat on their worn couch. The springs were broken. The fabric was stained. It was the most uncomfortable piece of furniture he'd ever experienced. And yet, somehow, it felt more real than anything in his penthouse. Maya climbed up beside him. Not shy anymore. Just sad. Carrying the weight of loss that no 9-year-old should have to carry. Mr. Philip, she said softly, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. What do you want for Christmas? She turned the question around on him. But Philip shook his head gently. No, Maya. I came to ask you that. What do you want for Christmas? What can I give you? He was ready. Ready to promise anything. A new bike. A computer. College tuition. A trust fund. Whatever she needed. Whatever she wanted. Whatever money could buy. Maya looked at the photograph of her father in her hands. Then at Philip. And asked the question that would haunt him forever. What I want for Christmas. Can Santa bring my daddy back? The world stopped. Completely stopped. Philip felt his chest constrict. Not a heart attack. Something worse. The complete and utter realization of his own powerlessness. He had billions. Literal billions. He could buy buildings. Countries. Politicians. Anything with a price tag. But this desperate wish from a grieving child? He was as powerless as the poorest person on earth. Philip's voice cracked. I can't, Maya. I'm so sorry, but I can't. He stood abruptly. Excuse me. Where's your bathroom? Rose pointed. Philip barely made it inside before the sobs came. Great, wrenching sobs that tore through his chest. Because Maya's question was Lola's question. The question every grieving person asks. Can you bring them back? Can you undo death? Can you reverse time? And the answer is always, always no. When Philip emerged from the bathroom, his eyes were red but his jaw was set. He sat back down, took Maya's small hand in his, and made a promise. I can't bring your daddy back, Maya. I couldn't bring my daughter back either. But I can make sure you're taken care of. I can make sure other children who've lost parents get help. And I promise you, I swear to you, I will be here. Not just with money, but with my time. My presence. Myself. Rose watched him. Still skeptical. Still waiting for the catch. Mr. Godswood, wealthy people make promises all the time. They write checks. They feel better. Then they disappear. I know, Philip said. And I've been that person. But not anymore. He pulled out documents from his coat. I bought you a house. A real house. Safe neighborhood. Good schools. I've arranged a position for Rose. And I'm starting a foundation. The Lola Godswood Foundation. For families like yours. For children who've lost parents. Rose's hands trembled as she looked at the papers. Why? Why are you doing this? Philip looked at Lola's photograph on the wall, then at Maya. Because I failed once. Because absence destroyed everything I loved. Because maybe, just maybe, presence can build something new. But could a man who destroyed his own family truly save someone else's? Or was Philip Godswood about to make the biggest mistake of his life? So here's the question that haunted Philip Godswood through the entire month of December. Can you really change who you are? Can a man who spent 55 years choosing ambition over connection suddenly become someone different? Someone better? Because making promises is easy. Keeping them is where most people fail. Rose didn't trust him. Not at first. She'd seen too many wealthy people play savior then vanish when the cameras stopped rolling. So she tested him. Called him at 6 in the morning when Maya was sick and needed to go to the doctor. Philip showed up. Personally. Drove them to the hospital. Sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. Didn't check his phone once. Didn't complain. Just showed up. A week later, Maya had a school presentation. Rose mentioned it casually, expecting nothing. Philip cleared his entire afternoon. Sat in a tiny classroom on a chair meant for children. Watched Maya talk about planets. Clapped louder than any other parent. And slowly, impossibly, Rose began to believe. But Philip's real family? They were harder to convince. His letters to Maureen went unanswered for weeks. Jack and Dre blocked his calls. They'd heard empty promises before. Watched their father choose work over family 1,000 times. Why would this time be different? Yet Philip kept trying. Not with grand gestures. Not with expensive gifts. But with consistent, quiet presence. He showed up at Jack's architecture firm. Not to talk. Just to say he was proud. He sent Dre articles about social justice, the work his son was passionate about. No commentary. Just, I saw this and thought of you. The adoption papers were finalized on Christmas Eve. Not to replace Timothy. Never to replace him. But to ensure Maya had security. Stability. A future protected by more than hope and struggle. Rose retained full custody as Maya's mother. Philip became her legal guardian. A partnership built on shared grief and genuine commitment. The lawyer handed Philip the final documents, and he stared at his signature. Philip Godswood. Legal guardian. A title that meant more than CEO. More than billionaire. More than any achievement he'd accumulated in 55 years. That evening, in the house Philip had bought for them, the house that was becoming a home, Maya helped decorate a Christmas tree. A real tree. Not the designer trees from Philip's penthouse. This one was crooked. Imperfect. Beautiful. Rose made hot chocolate. Burnt cookies sat on the counter because some traditions are worth keeping. And Philip helped Maya hang ornaments. One for her father Timothy. One for Lola. 2 angels watching over them. Mr. Philip? Maya asked, standing on a step stool to reach a high branch. Yes, sweetheart. Do you think my daddy and your Lola know each other? In heaven. Philip's throat tightened. I think maybe they do. I think maybe they're the ones who brought us together. Maya smiled. That gap-toothed smile that still reminded him so much of loss and so much of hope. I think so too. The knock came at noon on Christmas Day. Rose answered. And there, standing on the porch looking uncertain and uncomfortable, were Maureen, Jack, and Dre. Philip's breath caught. He hadn't expected them. Hadn't dared hope. Maureen spoke first. Her voice was careful. Guarded. But she was there. Your assistant sent us updates about the foundation. About Maya. About what you've been doing. She paused. We wanted to see if it was real. Philip nodded. Stepped aside. Come in. Please. The lunch was awkward. Long silences. Careful conversations. Old wounds hovering like ghosts at the table. Jack made a pointed comment about Philip trying to replace Lola. It hung in the air. Sharp. Painful. True. But Maya, with a child's honesty, said, nobody can replace people who died. But we can love new people too. That's what my mama says. And somehow, that simple truth from a 9-year-old cracked something open. Maureen watched Philip help Maya with her food. Saw how he listened when she talked. How he was present. Actually present. Not checking his phone. Not thinking about deals. Just there. Later, as Rose showed Maureen the foundation documents, as Jack and Dre examined plans for the orphanage renovations, Maureen pulled Philip aside. You can't undo what happened to Lola. You can't give me back those years you were absent. Philip nodded. I know. But I see you trying. I see you showing up now. It matters. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But acknowledgement. A beginning. As evening fell, they gathered in the living room. Maya showed everyone her drawings. One of Timothy in heaven. One of her mama. And one labeled, Mr. Philip who came back. Philip looked around the room. Maya beside him. Rose smiling. Maureen in thoughtful conversation. Jack and Dre examining foundation plans with cautious interest. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. His marriage wasn't restored. His sons hadn't fully forgiven him. Lola was still gone. Still dead. Still a wound that would never fully heal. But here's what Philip had learned. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing differently in the present. It's about showing up. Being present. Loving imperfectly but consistently. Maya whispered, I know Santa couldn't bring Daddy back. But maybe he sent you to us. And maybe he sent us to you too. Philip looked at Lola's photograph on the mantel. Next to Timothy's. 2 angels. 2 losses. 2 reasons to keep choosing presence over absence. Yes, sweetheart. I think maybe he did. Because in the end, we cannot resurrect the dead. Cannot undo our failures. Cannot rewrite our worst moments. But we can choose how we show up tomorrow. And the day after. And every day that follows. That's not redemption. That's something better. That's transformation. And it starts with a simple choice. To be present. To show up. To love again despite devastating loss. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments what presence means to you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, it's never too late to show up.